There we go. We're live. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Yep.
Good to Hi, everyone.
Happy to introduce the Die Hard panel. We're going to start off with letting you introduce yourselves and your books. Starting with John.
Oh, okay. So, happy Christmas, everyone. Thanks for having us on here today. My name's John Marley. My author name J.A. Marley, and I write crime fiction thrillers which are centered around a master thief called Danny Felix. And there are 2 books out currently. The third one will be published in Easter, for the Easter weekend next year, because I figured if people want to read while they go away on their holidays, they can pick up the book and take it with them. A little bit about me. Originally from Belfast, been living in England for 36 years now. Was previously a television producer for 30 years, both back in Ireland and here. And now, for my sins, writing books. Right, remember Christmas list. There it is in backward writing. London Interrupted is the first Danny Felix bigger book, and The Unholy Hours is the follow-up. Those are the 2 that are available right now. Over to you guys.
Daniel.
Hi everyone, and Merry Christmas. My name's Daniel Cole. I wrote a book called Ragdoll a few years ago that was a trilogy. They turned it into a television show as well. We could talk about that later. I wrote a book called Mimic after that. And my newest is a standalone, possibly the start of a new series. We'll see how it goes. And it's called Jackdaw. And that is about an ambitious detective and a charming assassin, and fate pushes them together into hunting down a serial killer, and it's great fun, I promise.
Sounds it.
Yeah. Over to you, Wayne. Over to you.
Absolutely. So my name's Wayne Kelly. I write as W.A. Kelly. My book is my first book was called Safe Hands, which is centered around when the book starts, he's a retired ex-safecracker. His talent, if you like, is he's got a very, very heightened sense of touch, so he can open a mechanical vault with just a heightened sense of touch and no tools or anything like that. And Safe Hands, basically, he gets pulled out of retirement for one last job for the sake of his dying wife, and also to protect his son, who's under threat. And there he meets a desperate single mother who's trying to protect her son from getting sucked into a life of crime, and it does lead to her having to kill to protect him. So that's kind of the first of the series, and the new one is about to come out in January, which is called The Callback, and that's based around Mickey Blake, who's the safecracker, but it's also his son, who's a talent agent, and he's got a client who's got a dream job in mind. He gets called back for a callback, and let's just say, without giving too much away, that it kind of turns deadly, and things go from there. So that's coming out later in January. But yeah, that's me. I'm based in the Midlands, and I write scripts. I've worked in video production and stuff for many, many years. And yeah, this is kind of what I do when I'm not doing that. So yeah, and Merry Christmas, I should have said. I didn't start to say that at the top like everyone else did.
Well, we've got some hellos before we get started from Sarah Blackburn, Sarah England, who might have a motivation to be watching, and Sam and Liz. Before we get started, we called our Winterfest a movie edition. Normally we make it Christmas themed, but so we're going to start off by asking all of our panels what your favourite Christmas movie is.
Right. Okay. Well, we're on the Die Hard panel, so I'd have to say that Die Hard is up there for me. It is one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite action films anyway, and I know there's a big debate about whether it's a Christmas film. It definitely is, as far as I'm concerned. But other than that, I'd say probably my favorite Christmas film is actually It's a Wonderful Life, which isn't very on brand for crime writing. It's very sentimental, and it's a bit of a weepy, but I do think it's a brilliant film, and it's also influenced loads of other films, including Back to the Future 2 and many, many other films that have come since. So that'd be my favorite.
Anyone else want to jump in?
I say that I say that Christmas hasn't started until you see Hans Gruber falling off the top of the Nakatomi Plaza. And somewhere actually in this flat of mine, I've got a T-shirt that says, marked safe from the Nakatomi Plaza in that Facebook style. And in terms of other Christmas movies, I just this week I treated myself. I watched Elf because Will Ferrell makes me laugh. Simple as that.
Good choice.
I'm the same. I agree that Die Hard is definitely a Christmas movie. I'm trying to think what we've already watched. I've got a 12-year-old, so we've sat down as a family and binged the Santa Claus movies, the Tim Allen ones, Santa Claus with Me. And we love those. I mean, like the sequels, the Mrs. Claus, I think it's called, and it should be rubbish, but it's not. I love it. And then they've come back again and made a series, so it's almost like you've got all this material. You've got 2 series as well, 2 TV series, so you've got loads to binge. So we're working through that at the moment.
Brilliant.
Cool. I'm going for Muppet Christmas Carol.
Good choice.
As the best
Christmas. Very good choice.
Yeah.
But I'll agree with you. I named the panels for this, so I think Die Hard's a Christmas movie.
Definitely.
So go back on.
I know that.
Go on, sorry.
I know that Bruce Willis has gone on record saying it's not a Christmas movie, but sorry, Bruce, you're wrong.
Agreed.
But I did invite you on because you all write thriller books. So what do you think are the features of a really outstanding thriller?
Who wants to go first?
I like the page turning element of it, and that kind of people refer. I get a bit annoyed. People refer to this as some kind of Netflix kind of phenomenon. Just one more episode, whereas growing up for me, it was always just one more chapter. And whenever I'm writing about Danny Felix and he's getting up to no good, doing his various thievery jobs, that's what I want to inspire in the readers, that they get to the end of the chapter and they think, just one more. And I think a good thriller has to have that. It has to take you on a roller coaster all the way through. It can't just be slow burn, big bang. It has to be lots of smaller bangs leading to the big bang, and that's what certainly keeps me reading decent thrillers. That's what defines one for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's exactly right, and I think for me, you should, like any good fiction, I think you should have characters that people can root for and that they care about. That doesn't mean that they have to all be goody two shoes. Obviously, John, your main character is a criminal, and so is my main character. It's just that there's worse criminals in there, so hopefully you root for mine. But I think you have to have characters that you root for. But also, I think with thrillers particularly, it's about raising the stakes, and I think that kind of speaks to what John's talking about as well. That turning the page element is that as you go through the book, the stakes, you just keep cranking it tighter and tighter and tighter, and the stakes keep getting higher and higher and higher for your characters, as much as you possibly can. I think that's what differentiates a thriller from, say, just kind of middle of the road fiction, for me anyway.
Yeah.
And then, for me, I always wanted to write for TV and movies originally. So when Ragdoll came out, everyone sort of... people love to compare it to other things, and the movie Seven came up an awful lot, which is an amazing movie, and but it's one that I don't really return to very often. It's so heavy going and it's so bleak, and there's not even like a ray of sunshine in that movie. And as much as I loved it, that's not what I wanted to write. I wanted something that I wanted a warmth to it and people to want to return to it. So it's this balancing act of trying to make it thrilling and scary and maybe gruesome in places, but overall just trying to make it entertaining and people wanting to spend time with these characters and know what happens next to them. And that's definitely what I'm trying to achieve when I'm writing.
And on the flip side of that, what do you think?
It's like one of my...
What would you think would
Sorry,
be the
Kaz,
thing?
I was just going No, I feel like I'm on breakfast television. Trying to do a satellite feed from LA. The only thing to add to that is that's why, like a film like Heat, because Seven and Heat came out roughly around the same time. A film like Heat is the antithesis to what you've just said, Daniel, isn't that? You really want to root for Robert De Niro's character, even though you know he's the bad guy supposedly, and you know Pacino's the good cop and blah blah blah. And you're right again, when that kind of the tension of that, it's inexorable. It just builds and builds and builds, and you know he can't just let things lie at the end of the film. He can choose to get away, and he doesn't. And that's brilliant. That's exactly what a good thriller should do. Whether it's on screen or on the page.
You've all been asked if you'd write a Christmas thriller.
Yeah, for me, yeah. I mean, I haven't got any. If I could find the right story, I think there's a lot of. I mean, we're talking about obviously Die Hard being a Christmas film, and it's an out-and-out action thriller, and the stakes are really, really high, and it just happens to be set at Christmas, and it's got that nice kind of Christmassy ending to it. So, yeah, if it's the right story for me, then yeah, absolutely, definitely, I haven't got anything against it. I think it's a good challenge, actually, probably to set yourself to write something at Christmas. Don't know what you guys think.
I've written. I'm in the process of writing a series of kids' books at the moment, which are kids' thrillers, kids' detective thrillers, and I'm trying to write a short story based around the main character, whose name is Barklington Burroughs, who's the greatest living dog detective, and so I'm halfway through writing a short story called Barklington Burroughs and the Last Sausage Roll, which is a Christmas mystery.
Ah, perfect.
I'm trying to think. I think when Hangman, my second in the Ragdoll trilogy, I kind of set New York at sort of Christmas time. I think it seems a lifetime ago when I wrote it now, but yeah, I think setting the scene and using the weather quite a lot. There's a term, isn't there? Pathetic fallacy, is that what it's called? When you use the weather to
yes,
in the background to sort of support what's going on in the story. And yeah, I mean, I love Christmas, so it's something I definitely consider using. I'm just trying to think how I'd use it more than just the weather. Yeah, I guess there's got to be another dimension to it to be a proper Christmas thriller.
Sharpened baubles or something like that.
Yeah.
People trapped somewhere, Stockholm alone.
Yeah.
Which is what I named.
There's all those slasher movies, isn't there? Santa Claus is a slasher movie killer, isn't there? It's Santa Slays, which I've never seen, but apparently it's really good fun.
Do you think, I mean, slasher films are a good example because they have really set tropes. Do you think there's any kind of set tropes in thrillers that kind of irritate you or you kind of try and avoid when you're writing your books? I don't know if there is, but you guys are the experts.
I think some of the thing. I mean, I think some things are kind of difficult to avoid anyway. But I think the only thing in general for me is when you're reading a book or you're watching certain films. I mean, you do get this particularly in some horror films of certain kind of, you know, there's that whole thing of don't go in there, or why, which I get, you have to get them to go in there because that's where the fun is and that's where the horror comes from. But sometimes when characters make illogical decisions, I know that all characters do if it's based on emotions or something like that, but if it's something that doesn't seem true to the way that the character's been set up, you know, if you've written 2/3 of a book and you've kind of set a character up in a certain way and then they do something that you just think, well, why have they done that? That I find that frustrating, but I don't think that's peculiar to thrillers. I think that's just something that you can get in any across the genres. But other than that, I mean, you know, I think there's you are usually building up to some kind of big climactic showdown or event with with most thrillers. Like, that's what Die Hard does, as we're using that as an example. Obviously that just cranks up until this, it's this huge explosive kind of ending. And I think that's kind of what we're all aiming for one way or another, whether it's emotionally or whether it's with actual explosions and death and blood and gore and everything else.
I think sorry, Joe.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Trying to avoid the Scooby-Doo ending is sort of a big one. You want to get all that information across. You don't want to leave any plot holes, but at the same time you don't want 10 pages of explanation of why the person did it. And yet it's a very hard thing to avoid as well, because you want to keep everything until the end. You want to cover everything, fill every hole, and trying to do that in a way that doesn't feel forced in there and shoehorned in and feels natural to the story. Again, it's a balancing act.
I'd agree with that.
I find it unforgivable. There's an author who has a very successful long-term detective thriller series, and in one of his books, that detective suddenly went from being the rule of law man, the absolute plays it by the book and believed in the system and da. He just, in one book, he went like a vigilante. And I remember thinking, that just does not stack up for that character for me. And the successful series is still ongoing now. I have not read a single one of those books since. And I'm not going to name who it is, but it literally just turned me off the whole thing. And I can't bear it if writers kind of shoehorn circumstance in to make their plot fit and forget and sacrifice character at the same time. That upsets me. Actually, physically upsets me.
Is it important when you're writing a thriller, and Daniel's going to have a good input on this because yours has been adapted, to kind of almost write it visually? Do you think about it sort of almost as you're writing being like a movie? Because I kind of think of them, if you're reading them, as being like the kind of thing you would watch as a movie.
I don't know what it's like for everyone else, but for me, it plays out like a movie in my head, and then I sort of write down what I see as I go along. And I mean, I think that's my big aim when I'm writing, is what I want to create is a movie in a book. That's how I want it to feel. And I've used lots of little tricks along the way to try and do that. In Mimic, there's the drawings included in the book that the killer has done. And there's actual clues to the plot inside the drawings. And then we have falling leaves acting as a ticking clock, and they get more and more heavy during the closing chapters. Sometimes I'll just cut away and describe basically a camera shot. Include it so it still flows in the story, but it's basically just, here's a camera direction, this is what it would look like on the big screen. And I think I'm always sort of striving to make it feel more and more like a movie and get the reader more and more involved.
Yeah, I think for me, I totally agree with that, Daniel. But for me as well, I think I tend to think about it like that from a structural point of view as well. So I tend to think if I was adapting it, or when I'm writing it, I don't want, particularly with TV and film, there shouldn't ever be a scene where you're like, well, what was the point of that scene? There was no A to B. I've not learned anything about the character. It's not moved the story forward. There's not been anything. And when I'm editing my books, I try to think of it like that. I try to think, okay, well, if this was a scene, would I invest the budget in actually filming it? Would it be worth getting these 3 actors in this room to do this thing? Well, what's the point of it? And can I condense it down and maybe put some of this information in some of the other scenes? Almost as if I've got a budget, because that's anybody that's actually made any film or TV or anything like that, that is the key above anything else, really. That is the main thing, is the budget. It's the difference between it's a foot chase or it's a car chase or it's a helicopter chase or anything else. And obviously we don't have that as writers. We can make it as big and whatever as we want to, but I do tend to think along the same lines in terms of structurally, it's like, well, do I really need this scene? Could I condense this down? Could I move things on a little bit quicker? Can we just cut? Because again, I think we forget that we can do that. Sometimes in books we think, well, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Well, you can just cut these 3 scenes out in the middle and just tell them, okay, well, this has happened, and now here we are, and we're moving on. And I think it's remembering to do that. That's kind of how I think about it. I don't know about you, John.
I think going back to what we were saying earlier on about thrillers being small set piece, slightly bigger set piece, slightly bigger set piece, slightly bigger set piece, climax. I think that I think about that. I get terribly worried if I'm working through a manuscript and think, oh, I haven't killed anybody in a while, or I haven't had a crash bang wallop moment in a while. So it is that set piece, and that's exactly what thrillers on the screen are like as well. And I think if you're writing action scenes and tension scenes, if you weren't writing them in a way that the reader can see them in their head, like a movie, I think you're not giving the reader enough of A, what entertains them, and B, what will keep them rooted in the story and in the characters. So they kind of, by thrillers by definition, have to have that cinematic element to them.
You've been asked by Laura Hamilton if it's difficult to not stretch the dramatic license too far in your writing, such as normally unserviceable injuries, etc. We all know those, don't we? Like the movies where people are like shot and then something else and then something else, and they're still running around at the end. I think that's what she's trying to say.
Well, I've just watched, I won't give any spoilers because some people might have not have caught up yet, but I've been watching The Day of the Jackal, latest adaptation. There's a bit in that later on that's very much speaks to what you sort of have to go with it. You just have to sort of suspend your disbelief a bit, because you're like, what? He's been in a car crash. He's been shot. He's been stabbed. He's been, and he's still going. I think it's one of those things. I think you get away with what you think you can get away with, and I also think depends what kind of book you're writing and what the tone of it is. So I think it's a bit like a film. I think if the film's got quite a heightened tone and everything's very big and brash in a certain kind of style anyway, I think that's fine. I think if you've written something where up until that point everything's felt quite gritty and real, and then all of a sudden you do it, I think it's a bit more difficult to justify. And I think you kind of have to just kind of weigh it by case thing. But I think it's a tonal thing for me. I don't know what you guys think about it, but
do you want to go, John?
Well, the one that the one of the main bad guys and Jack Reacher, and they've got their guns up, and then Jack Reacher, as they challenge each other, he puts the gun down, and the other guy puts his gun down, and they go, and it's like, let's finish this like men with our fists instead. And I remember watching that in the cinema and shouting out loud, I won't repeat the word, God's sake, because it's just like, really? I mean, you both have rifles in your hands, but no, you're going to opt to punch it out, boys. I mean, things like that. That's stretching of that kind of credibility. Just it makes me laugh out loud, actually, when I see it.
So I think sort of along the lines of what Wayne was saying, I think it depends on the sort of book you're trying to read. The thing is that there's people out there. I think you got to stick to what you're good at. And there's people out there who are like ex-police officers and ex-sort of experts who are writing these amazing, gritty, true to life crime thrillers. And I can never compete with that. So what I do instead is do what I'm good at. I've wasted my life watching far too many movies and television, and that's what I lean into. So, I mean, right from the start, I mean, Ragdoll is ridiculous. It's six dead body parts sewn together into one. That's scene one in Ragdoll, and you can't really try and carry that off with a straight face as a gritty, down to earth police procedural. Right from the start, again, I'm back to it's a movie and a book. It's hyper real. The characters are larger than life. But then, like Wayne said, it's also you establish the rules in your book and you can't break them. Once you've established them,
that's it.
You've got to stick to it. And even you could break them, and then you've lost that suspending the disbelief, and you've got to stay true to that. But I think as long as you do that from the beginning and know what your rules are, you can get away with it.
I think it's when you set up with any story, it's the internal logic thing. I think once you've set up the internal logic, whether it's even it's like with fantasy films or superhero things or anything, because I've seen those before, and obviously the whole thing's fantastic, and it's anything kind of goes. But even there, if they'll get to a certain point, and if they break the rule that they've set up, this character can only do this once because of X, Y, and Z, and then later in the film they do it again because just on this one occasion they can actually do it twice. It's like, well, no, you've cheated. Is how I think about it. I always think of the thing from Misery. That Annie Wilkes goes on. You've cheated. They've cheated in the story. They've jumped out of the car before the car goes off the cliff or whatever she says. I think she's right. I think it's when people cheat. I think readers know. They're like, how are you going to get? You've set up this amazing premise. You've locked your characters into this thing that they seemingly can't get out of, and they're obviously thinking, oh, how are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? And then you just say, well, he just punches a guard and he just walks out of the room or whatever. And it's like, that's when it's a big letdown for me. But I think as long as you stick within the rules that you set, like Daniel said, I think you're fine.
It's that expression, isn't it? And with £1 he was free.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It's that thing. For me, the robberies in my books, I'm always very keen to make sure that the robberies would work. I think if the job that he's planning or building to just is impossible and stupid, then I think I've lost the reader at that point. I'm really keen to make sure that if you step back and think about the jobs that he works up to, they've got to be plausible. They've got to be feasible for me.
So we're partly here to sell people on your books, although there is someone on the thread of comments that we can't see on here, by the way, guys, who said they really enjoyed Safe Hands, Wayne.
Oh, tell them thank you very much, whoever it is. Thanks, Mum.
So sell them to people if they've not discovered you before. Introduce us to your main character in your book. Tell us a little bit about them.
Okay, so Danny Felix is, as I say, he's a master thief. He basically comes from a very unhappy childhood, walks away from his family in his teenage years, and embarks on a life of ne'er-do-well crime. And in the first book, we meet him. He has just completed a cash-in-transit van robbery and thinks he's about to be arrested for that. But in actual fact, the villain of the piece, his nemesis, D.I. James Harkness, really wants to recruit him to pull off the robbery of a lifetime that will bring London to a standstill. And it's the book is literally all about the planning of that and whether or not he can come out the other side with his life intact. Never mind whether the robbery is a success or not. It's just whether he could be able to survive it. And the follow-up, it just is a follow-on from him. He's I won't say whether the robbery is a success or not, but he does survive. And he's 18 months later, he's in the Florida Keys, deciding he's trying to live a life a bit more quiet. But of course, being Danny Felix, that's never going to happen.
Who wants to go next?
You go, Daniel. We good.
Okay.
We'll go clockwise. Yeah.
So Jackdaw is my latest book, and I started writing it over the COVID lockdowns. And I think it came out how it did, sort of in reaction to that. We were all locked up and trapped, and this was just like a pure slice of escapism for me, and I think I wrote it as much for me as for the readers. You know, it was my way of coping. So I've got this ambitious female detective, Scarlett Delaney, and I thought it'd be really interesting if she was if she was actually the daughter of a serial killer, and it's her partner and mentor is the man who took down her father and then sort of took on the role of being a father figure for her in the police force. So I thought that was quite an interesting dynamic where you've sort of got this father figure feeling forever guilty about it and as though he owes her something and almost going out of his way to make sacrifices for her. And then, of course, on her side of things, she's desperately trying to prove herself. Everyone sort of thinks she's, this black sheep in the police force. There's something wired wrong in her head, just like her father. And they're all sort of waiting for it to go off. And then sort of the third character that I've thrown in there to make it all a bit more interesting is this super charming James Bond-esque hitman, an assassin. And he is just, he's so bad. He's just dropping people left, right, and centre, but he does it with such swagger and in such a fun way. Like you can't help but enjoy it and root for him. Over to you, Wayne.
Great. My main character is Mickey Blake. So at the start of Safe Hands, he's 60 years of age. He's done his last big score was sort of nearly 20 years ago, and he's been living in Spain for the rest of the time with his wife, and that's been going okay, but he's run out of money for various different things, and his wife's actually dying of cancer, and obviously there's no NHS out there, so a bit Breaking Bad, I suppose, in that term. That for that he ends up taking a job against his better judgment. He gets called back to the UK, to Skegness. I don't know whether everyone on the call is familiar with Skegness, but it's basically a rundown seaside town and on the East Coast. And it's kind of a bit of a metaphor for him. It's run down and past its prime. And so he's drawn back there to basically rob a gangland casino. There's an undercover police officer that's involved in it somewhere along the line. He meets Hazel, who's a single mum, and you're not quite sure how she's involved in the story when it first starts. But her son, she's trying to protect him from getting sucked into a life of crime. But the thing about Mickey in particular, as I said at the top, is that he's got this very heightened sense of touch, which kind of sounds sort of supernatural or something. It isn't. It was actually based on a real life skill that some people have got. In particular, an American guy called Jeff Sitar. I'm not convinced that's his real name, but that's what he goes by. And he was the world champion safecracker for many, many years, and he's now a locksmith or whatever. But you can usually find videos of him on YouTube. But he essentially, he's got a very, very heightened sense of touch, and we're talking about mechanical safes, so he can't do it with the newfangled digital safes and things like that. But he basically lays hands on the safe, and he can essentially feel what's going on. He's got he's very sensitive to it, and he can work out the combination. He can open it, and that's Mickey's special skill, hence the title Safe Hands. And there's only really him that can do it, so that's why he gets drawn out of retirement to do that. And then with the new book, he comes back to the UK to live in Leicestershire, which is where he's from originally, and he's going straight with his locksmith business, which happens to be called Safe Hands. And there it basically goes from there. And his son, who is not a criminal or anything, does get sucked into this kind of criminal world. And then it's up to Mickey to try to extricate him from that and come out of that. So that's kind of where I was going with that. But I like the idea of writing an older protagonist. Not that he's like ancient or anything. He's only 60, but you don't tend to get too many in crime, particularly. You don't get too many older protagonists like that, especially that are actual criminals. Tend to be of a certain age, and he's I thought that was interesting to kind of explore that, really. And it's kind of in where I'm based in the Midlands, so that's been fun as well to do that, because nobody ever writes about Leicester apart from in EastEnders. When a character gets sent away for a while on a hiatus, they always end up in Leicester because no one knows where it is. So, but apart from that, I thought I'd try to put Leicester on the map. So that's the plan.
Right, I'm going to ask you this rather good question off the stream from Sarah England. She says, when you lay awake at night plotting murders, does the method and severity of the fictional demise ever correlate suspiciously with how vexing your spouse has been that day?
I'm single.
Or just general people then. Do you ever get frustrated by people and want to write them in your book?
There's a very famous episode, a radio comedy show, which had Tom Baker appearing on it once. And the question at the end of every episode, they asked the guests, they said to them, what would be your superpower? And it got to Tom Baker to give his answer. And he said, it's not a superpower exactly. What I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to shoot 3 people every day with impunity. and the host says, what do you mean? And he said, well, just 3 people I can shoot and not, just not be held to account for it. All right, okay. And he said, is that something you'd really like? He said, invariably, I meet 3 people every day that I'd like to shoot. And usually when I meet the first one, I think, there's bullet number 1.
I don't know where my ideas come from really. I think some of it sort of people that you don't like. The next book I'm working on has definitely sort of come from that, but certainly not my spouse. Yeah, definitely nothing to do with her.
No, ditto. I'm definitely going to say that in case she's watching anyway, apart from anything else. But no, it's not. I don't know whether you guys agree, but I think what's interesting is often, especially when you've had a bit of time away from a book, if you're coming back and you're editing it, or maybe it's been out and then you come back to it for some other reason, it's interesting sometimes because you sort of see things that you didn't realize at the time. You're like, oh, actually, I've kind of written about that thing that was on my mind at the time, or that person I can sort of see in that character. I think it all comes out somewhere. Hopefully not the violence, but I in my experience, most crime writers, thriller writers, whatever, they tend to be the most normal, down-to-earth, well-adjusted people. And I think part of it is because our therapy is writing. We write about all this stuff rather than actually going out there and doing it. But the only thing I would say is our internet search histories are a bit dubious. That I would agree with that for sure.
My favorite question for everybody whenever I do an author chat is what your top reads recently, or your reads of the year, because we're at the end of the year.
Should have thought about that before.
I should have warned you before we went on. I like to not. It's like seeing you all squirm as you think of it.
I particularly enjoyed Cleat by James Lee Burke this year. James Lee Burke is my favorite author of all time. The Robichaux novels, I think, are just his use of prose, works of genius. Love it, love it, love it. And Cleat, which came out this year, was no disappointment. I'm in love with James Lee Burke and everything he writes, basically.
I think for me, excuse me, I really enjoyed Don Winslow's the second of the trilogy that he's done. I think not City on Fire. It's the one after that, whatever it is. It's Don Winslow's second one in that trilogy. I think City on Fire is the first one. City of Dreams, actually, I think it's called City of Dreams, was really good. Also read City of Dreams. Also Heat 2. Which was, as we were talking about Heat earlier on, it was the book, obviously, is the follow-up, which I think is actually going to be made into a film now, which will be interesting. But I kind of wasn't sure whether I'd like that or not, because I loved the film so much, but I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I think it's Michael Mann's co-written it with Meg Gardner, I think, is it?
Meg Gardner it is, yeah.
Yeah. I really recommend that. That's great, and also it's not really crime. But it's kind of dark. Is Dan Howarth, Last Night of Freedom? That's really good. That's sort of a Deliverance meets Dead Man's Shoes, British kind of stag party kind of story. Recommend that as well. There would be the 3 that I choose.
I don't have a very good answer for that, I'm afraid. It's a really funny job being a writer, because your job is, it's in your head, And if you've got a very stressful life, like you're doing the house move from hell, as I have been this last year, sort of writing and reading and things just go, and it's really hard to get back into it. Everything's settled down now, and I'm writing again like mad. But I find that it's the same headspace to be reading. If I want to sit and do something quiet, I'm so far behind on my writing now that I can't spend it reading someone else's book. I need to run up to my attic and get writing again. So right now I'm desperately trying to make up for lost time, because moving house is not fun.
I think it can be, but it depends on how much in charge you are of it. As someone who moved house a few times as a child, it was quite fun. But
yeah, pretty low responsibility on that one.
Yeah,
not in charge. So it's worse if you're in charge of it.
Yeah, try doing mortgage sums when you're a writer. That's very fun. The bank loves you.
Yeah, I agree.
Sarah Blackburn's asked if you've ever acted out a scene from your book, either in public or private.
Well, I actually I read the audiobook for Safe Hands, which I've got experience doing voiceovers and different bits of narration for other people, but it was different doing it for myself. And I don't think I realized how difficult it would be until I started doing it. But that's very much that. You do have to act it out, because you're not just reading it. Obviously, you have to do voices of characters and you have to act it out. So I've acted out the whole book, I suppose you could argue. But no, I think when you've got a difficult scene where there's lots of moving parts and there's people in the room and you need to sort of visualize it in your mind, I've kind of probably done that before in the past. Okay, this person's standing here, they're standing there. If they've got to get this thing from here to there, how does that work? I've probably done that. I don't know whether you guys have done something similar. Sometimes if something's quite complicated like that to get in your mind, it can help to sort of think about it like that.
I don't know about acting it out, but when I'm designing murders and things, so I handwrite everything in the notebook. All my books are written out by hand to start off with, but I start drawing stick men, so it probably looks like a crazy person's been scrawling through these books, because I've got these decapitated stick men doing horrible things to each other, and that's how I plan my murders and things, rather than acting it out, I suppose.
I walk the routes of my robberies. So because that way at least I know that, again, I'm not cheating the audience by saying there's a left turn here that the car can get down. I know there is. So which may, people who see me in the street may look like I'm casing a joint. That's because I am.
You are.
In order to be.
It's a great cover for your actual robbery. Yeah, it's a great cover for your actual robberies, John, isn't it? Let's be honest.
I've never, listen, I don't own a balaclava, and I've never robbed a post office. But yeah, no, so I would walk, I walk the routes, and I again, just to try and make sure that what I'm suggesting is possible and can be achieved and can work out in the way in which I've dreamt it up.
I'm always curious when you write thrillers, how much of the kind of random things that you wouldn't normally try every day when you're writing them, that people kind of want to go and try. Like, have you tried trying to pick a lock? Have you tried firing a gun? In the name of research, have you? I mean, obviously, you've not broken into somewhere or hopefully stitched bits.
Well, you say that. Yeah, I think in the past I've tried messing about trying to pick locks and things, and I know another writer called Rod Duncan, and they weren't crime books specifically, but his main character was that was their whole thing, was picking locks, and as a consequence, he bought lots of old padlocks and different bits and pieces off eBay, and he actually got quite good at it. He could actually do it. I'm just not as dedicated. I've not got the time, unfortunately, so I just have to. And to be quite honest with you, I like using my imagination, you know, to a certain extent. I imagine how this person, how it, you know, I've done a bit of research in terms of watching how this particular guy did it, and what he's kind of how he approaches it, and then the rest of it is like we do with all writing. It's trying to get into that headspace and imagining how you can sort of explain that to the reader in an interesting way. That's kind of the way that I did it, but I don't think I've done any other things. I haven't learned to tie any weird knots or anything like that, or anything.
Either of you two tried any interesting
I've
skills?
tried to pick locks. I've tried to pick locks, sometimes successfully, sometimes dreadfully badly. And I have gone and done the gun range thing, and I've tried all the. I've gone to gun range twice, specifically to try the guns that I envisage my characters using them, and that is equal. It's equal parts a lot of fun and equal parts really scary. Really scary.
So I got a pair of handcuffs as research to see if I could learn how to. I was watching all the YouTube videos to try and see if I could pick that lock. I don't want to gross anyone out, but I've got a very weird thumb that does this, and like double. And it I don't need to pick a lock. My thumb I can pull handcuffs off without picking the lock at all. So that was sort of useful. I still can't pick a pair of handcuffs, but I know I can get out of them now.
Wow. Yeah, my brother's got thumbs like that, Daniel. Exactly the same.
Oh, okay, not just me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a useful skill to know you've got, though, I guess.
It's good to have it in the bag, I guess. Yeah.
You're ever kidnapped, you can escape the handcuffs.
Exactly.
TG's asked if any of you would ever co-write a book with another author.
I think coming from television, as my background, television is a very collaborative industry. I've developed TV shows with other people. I've written scripts with other people. So yeah, it's something that I would absolutely consider, and in a funny kind of way, because writing books can be quite a lonely pursuit sometimes. So to have that opportunity to bounce off somebody, I think would be a delight. Actually, it would be good fun.
Yeah, I like the idea of it. I think it's just finding the right person and working out how you do it as regards the division of labor. I've co-written scripts and things with people, and that's been okay. And once you find out how you're going to work and how you're going to approach it, but I haven't tried it with a book. But I'd be up for giving it a go on the right project, I think.
Same here for me. There's a couple of projects that I can't really talk about where it's sort of on the cards, but when it comes to the logistics of it gets very complicated very quickly. When you've just got the very basic idea of a plot, it sort of works, but the problem with crime thrillers, they're so convoluted and everything overlaps that it all sort of goes to pot very quickly. So there's a couple of projects on the go, but still trying to get my head around how it's going to work, to be honest.
One of my favourite questions to ask, and I kind of feel like I can, because Wayne's the only person I think I've interviewed before on this panel. So it's like I can ask you all my favourite questions from previous author chat. Oh, it's fun. Would you make a graphic novel version of one of your books? I feel like thriller books would adapt really well to that kind of format.
Yeah, I would. I mean, there's what's a really good series of graphic novels based on Richard Stark's Parker novels, which I'm massive
yeah.
fan of anyway. Yeah, I'm a big fan of those of Donald E. Westlake and his pen name Richard Stark as well. I'm a big fan of those books anyway. And when the first graphic novel came out, I bought it, and they really suit it because it's kind of a bit noir as well. Yeah, I think I'd love to do that. I think it'd be great to collaborate with somebody. I mean, I can't draw, so it won't be me that's going to be doing that side of things, but it'd be nice to collaborate with somebody that could bring it to life in that way. Same as anything, I think.
Daniel?
Road to Perdition, that film with Tom Hanks, that came from a graphic novel which Sam Mendes directed. And I loved the graphic novel. I'd read the graphic novel before I saw the film. Yeah, I mean, and I agree with Wayne. Parker's one of the great anti-heroes of crime fiction, and those graphic novels really work. And I'm a huge Batman fan, so comic book anything is right up there by me. Simple as that.
Yeah, so same here for me actually. There's this bizarre thing where I'm the worst. I can't draw at all. Like I mentioned, all I can do is stick men doing horrible things to each other.
Yeah, same.
And yet I've had my ridiculous pictures featured in 3 books now of mine, which I think makes me a published illustrator, just to show how unfair it is. But yeah, a graphic novel. I mean, yeah, that sounds a great idea. I mean, it's sort of bridging that gap again between sort of books and the movies, which is what I really want to do. And yeah, I think it sounds a really interesting idea. I'm going to look into that as soon as we get off the call, I think, actually. Thank you. Yeah.
This is an interesting one for you as well. Sam's favorite question to ask in an author chat is if there's a Netflix adaptation or any other TV version of your book, what character or thing would you play? Would you make an on-screen cameo? Would you want to be I thought you've had this happen, Daniel, so
yeah, I mean, a lot of it happened over COVID, so that was their excuse for not letting me get involved at all. But I think that would have been the case, pandemic or not. Yeah, it's an odd thing because I sold the TV rights to Ragdoll before I'd even sold the book. Wow! So I kind of gave away those rights very early on, and it was the team behind Killing Eve who actually made the Ragdoll adaptation, which was that was very exciting. But they certainly went in their own way with it. It veers so far away from the book. After episode 1 that I didn't really recognize it as my book anymore, but just sort of enjoyed it for what it was. But yeah, I was never invited. I don't think I'd have taken them up on making a cameo or anything like that. I'm quite happy. I think if you're a writer, you're probably not desperate to be in front of the cameras and stuff that much. So I'm quite happy taking the back seat.
I think I'd be too busy staring at the check they paid me for the rights.
I think I'd be interested to go on set and see it, but like Daniel, I'm not that bothered about. I don't think I'd be bothered about actually appearing in it. But I do think. I mean, I haven't. It'd be a nice situation to be in. I've obviously not had any of my stuff adapted or anything yet, but I think my instinct is that you do kind of have to, if you are going to go down that route. I think, like Daniel's just said, you saw it become something completely different to what you kind of initially imagined, and I think you kind of have to be comfortable with that before, if you're going to go down that route, because it's a completely different medium. You're giving it to somebody else. Like John said, it's a collaborative thing anyway. They've got their own vision and they've got their own way that they want to go with it. And I know sometimes they get a writer and they have them really heavily involved in it and they kind of want to hear how they want it, where they want to go with it. But usually they want to go their own way. And I've known some writers get really, really sort of frustrated and angry about it. But I think if you're going to sell it, I think you've got to kind of go, well, that's different, because the thing with it is you've always got the book. It's like if it does go off and does something else, you've always got the book. They can always come back to it and see what you did. That is your vision. You've put it out, and that's your version of it. So that's always going to be there. The book the film doesn't negate it, or the TV show doesn't negate it. It's always going to be there. But it'd be a nice dilemma for me to have at this stage, and that'd be great. I'm slightly jealous there, Daniel. I've got to be honest.
There's my favorite character in my second book, The Unholy Hours. I wouldn't be able to play my favorite character, but it would be ripe for a really good cameo for someone. It's a septuagenarian stripper who is based on an actual septuagenarian stripper who works in the Florida Keys. So anybody who fancied a richly drawn cameo appearance, that would be the one to pick, I think.
And then we're coming up towards the end of our time. So do you want to remind everyone who's watching, who's enjoyed listening to you all telling us a little bit about thrillers, what they're going to go away and buy?
Well, my first book's called Safe Hands. It's W.A. Kelly, and it's about Mickey Blake, retired safecracker. And the follow-up is available for pre-order. That's called The Callback. And that comes out in January, but it's available for pre-order now. So if you go and find me on Facebook, I'm on facebook.com/WA Kelly author, and come and say hello. It'd be great to chat. Thanks.
So my first book is called London Interrupted, all about Danny Felix, a thief who's drawn into a big job by a highly corrupt cop, and the follow-up, The Unholy Hours, in which he is trying to go straight, but it's useless. Basically, it's never going to happen for him. And the third book, which will be out at Easter time next year, a little exclusive for you. The title is Hollow Horse, and it's the third Danny Felix adventure. And you can find out more about me and also about the book I've just finished writing, which is set during the Belfast Northern Ireland Troubles in 1981. And that you can find out more about all of that on my website, jamarley.com. You can subscribe to the newsletter and leave me a message, and always welcome and happy to hear from readers. In fact, I love hearing from readers. So there you go.
Yeah, so for me, Ragdoll's the only book I've got to show you at the moment. If you want to go back to the start, you can compare it to the TV show, which I think is available on Amazon Prime at the moment. It's on there. Same Daniel Cole Books, if you want to find me online anywhere on the social media and things. And Jack Doyle would make the perfect Christmas present. I promise. It's the most fun we have while killing people off left, right, and centre. It's good fun.
And then all that's left to say is thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Merry
Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Keep the change, you filthy animals.